Ready to go? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Well, hey everybody, welcome. This is the March 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. It looks like we're all here, but we will of course start with a roll call by the clerk.
Mayor Damon Siles.
Present.
Councilmember Susan Romaine.
Present.
Councilmember Barbara Fouchie.
Present.
Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell.
Present.
Councilmember Danny Nowell.
Present.
Councilmember Sammy Slade.
Present.
All right, thanks, Mary. Is Fred Joyner with us tonight? He hasn't made it yet. In that case, we'll move on to a resolution that we have. This is a resolution that we have done every year for a number of years. It's a resolution recognizing Earth Hour. And I sent that around to council members earlier this morning. Randy, I think as in previous years, do you want to just give a brief synopsis of what this resolution is all about? What is Earth Hour? And then we can perhaps accept a motion to approve the resolution.
Yeah. Well, Earth Hour is an opportunity to turn off the lights and appreciate the collective action that we all can have to generate awareness about protecting nature and tackling climate and addressing climate together. Before I move the resolution, I do want to acknowledge that it was Randy Dodd who brought this Earth Hour resolution forth the first time. And I want to say it was a good bit of time ago, maybe, what was it, 2009. And I also want to share publicly that this is supported by 190 countries and territories annually, globally. And with that, I'll move the motion to accept Earth Hour. Oh, and let me just say that it is March 26th, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. So it takes a little bit of determination to remember you're turning off the lights for that 1 hour in recognition of Earth Hour. So with that, I'll move the motion, the Earth Hour proclamation resolution.
Thank you, Randy. Is there a second? Sammy, is that a second?
Sure, I'll go ahead and second. And I just wanted to comment, Randy prompted me during our climate action team, we were brainstorming projects that can happen in the neighborhoods as we're putting together our neighborhood action for climate. But one of the things that has been very inspiring, and there's precedent in our town, is when Tally-Ho neighborhood was annexed, they chose not to have streetlights in large part because they wanted to still continue to enjoy the view of stars. But the other byproduct of that is it's a savings. It represents a savings. Even though we've converted to LED, it still represents a big savings if there are neighborhoods that are willing to not have streetlights. And as part of our neighborhood actions, I'd like to request that staff include that as something along a menu of options that neighbors can consider when they are thinking of how to take climate action. Obviously, it would take a process and a buy-in by the neighbors, but the possibility of them requesting their streetlights be turned off should be on one of the things that we consider, and especially in light of every day hearing about tragic aspects of the climate emergency we're in, such as the Antarctic being 70 to 90 degrees above average, unprecedented thing that has happened, while at the same time in the Arctic it was 40 degrees above average. So every day we're hearing more and more sci-fi like effects of climate the climate emergency that we're in. And so whatever we can do to do our part would go a long way. So I'll second the resolution.
Thank you, Sammy. The resolution has been moved and seconded. Randy, did you have further discussion?
Just wanted to add that when Tally Ho brought that forth, there were several neighborhoods interested at the time, and it was a request for dark sky. So just if people are trying to find some information on that request, they might find it under dark sky. And thank you, David.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved by Randy and seconded by Sammy that we adopt the resolution recognizing Earth Hour, which is, as Randy said, March 26th between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. Turn off those lights. Enjoy the sky. We'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Barbara.
Aye.
Randy.
Aye.
Danny.
Aye.
Susan.
Aye, but were you going to read the resolution?
We
Mayor, or-
can read the resolution if you like.
I'm not saying that you have to. I was just wondering, I was just asking if it may have been forgotten, but if that was we've also had a lot of information on it already. So I'm fine just saying aye.
Okay, great, thanks, Susan. Sammy?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Matter passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. All right, I'm still not seeing Fred with us yet, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the announcement of upcoming meetings.
Okay. Tomorrow, March 23rd at 6 p.m. is a Racial Equity Commission meeting, and that's virtual. And then next Monday, March 28th, is a Human Services public hearing, and that's also virtual. That's at 6 o'clock. That's the only two that I see on the calendar.
Great, thank you. I just have one to add, and then also would like to hear from others if you have anything more. This coming Sunday, March 27th at 3 p.m. is the 32nd annual Pauli Murray Awards, which is held every year by the Orange County Human Relations Commission. And I especially wanted to point this year's ceremony out because the recipient of this year's Youth Award is someone very familiar to us all, Kendall Lytle, who serves on the Mayor's Youth Advisory Board, as well as the NAACP Youth Council, among other activities. She's a very busy person in addition to school. Kendall's great, and she is receiving the Youth Award for this year's Pauli Murray Awards. And so just wanted to note that and encourage folks to register for that event if you're around. Are there other upcoming town or county related meetings? Susan?
This is not town or county, but because it is Women's History Month, I was hoping to just very quickly recognize Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and the history that she is making right now during her confirmation hearings as the first Black woman to be nominated for the Supreme Court. So I wanted to just recognize that great achievement we are witnessing each day. Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you, Susan. It's Ketanji.
I'm sorry.
That's our
I'm
first.
sorry if I
You
mispronounced that.
mispronounced it first.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, but thank you.
You both. Yeah, hopefully the Senate committee will get through some of the nonsense that we saw today as quickly as they can. Okay, any other meetings for council members to announce? Nope. All right. We had one, let me just check my list here. Still not seeing Fred. We had one person signed up to speak tonight, although I'm not seeing them in attendance. So we will move on to the consent agenda, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on the consent agenda is the approval of the January 11, 2022 meeting minutes with a change by Councilmember Romaine. The second item is a resolution setting a public hearing for debt financing of the town's share of design and construction costs for the 203 South Greensboro Street Capital Improvement Project. The next item is consideration of a resolution setting the public hearing for commercial building special use permit A, SUP-A, located at 201 North Greensboro Street and 100 Center Street for April 26, 2022. And the last item is an amendment to the town manager employment agreement.
Okay, thanks, Richard. All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? A motion by Randy, is there a second? Second by Danny.
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor? I'll take the roll call vote. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy? Randy, was that, I'm sorry, I missed that. Was that an aye? Thank you. Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. All right, I'm trying to slow roll us here to just in case Fred pops in, but he's not. Looks like he's not able to make it tonight. So we'll see him hopefully at our next meeting. Okay, Mr. Manager, next item, please.
A, the only item under other matters is a work session. This is a continued council discussion of Carrboro Connects 2022 to 2042, the comprehensive plan. The purpose of the agenda item is for the town council to consider and specify revisions to the draft comprehensive plan, Carrboro Connects 2022 to 2042.
Thank you. So Richard, I don't know if staff was wanting to, I assume they'll want to join us. We have staff and our TESCA team with us again tonight, I believe. Do we want to go ahead and pull them over to be with us?
Yes.
So if you're a staff person and or TESCA person, if you would, it looks like Mary's on top of it, so we'll let her figure that out. Hey everyone, I see Scott and Francie from TESCA, welcome, and Trish from the planning department, welcome Trish. Okay, I don't know if you all were planning to present anything or share anything, or if we're just gonna kind of start where we left off. I do want to just note that we made so much great progress, I think, as a group in our March 8th meeting. And a very long work session, but I think it was incredibly productive and really useful. And that set us up well, I think, for tonight's continued discussion. I wonder if it would be useful at some point for staff or for TESCA, the TESCA team to, if they feel like this would be helpful, to walk us through the responses that they offered in the document that we shared. But before we do that, I just had I know there are a couple of things that I wanted to make sure to note. One was there was at least one addition to the document where I collated everybody's feedback and sent that to staff last week. At least one addition that I missed in doing that, and that was from Barbara. So I just wanted to make sure that I noted that one, which is on page 13 of attachment F. So attachment F is the collected comments of the council, and along with some of the staff's and TESCA's responses. Page 13 under the final bullet for other comments, general comments. And Barbara added just a note there, noting that she too had shared Susan's comment about expressing why racial equity is an important pillar of the plan. And also Barbara adding and noting, and I'll include this in the document as well, that historical context on that matter is really important to understanding as we carry forward this plan. So Barbara, thank you for that. I think our goal tonight is to move through the rest of what we didn't quite get through last time. I will say that there were not that many additions to the document by council members since our last meeting. There were a handful, and staff had those ready to respond to when they received all of that from me last week. And so I think what we want to do tonight is get to a point where we've gotten through the rest of that as best we can, and we have a kind of a final guidance, document of our comments for staff to take with them that we'll approve at the end of tonight's discussion. And so before we get to that, I see that Barbara's hand is up, so I want to make sure to recognize Barbara to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. And so I think you answered the question I was getting ready to ask about the direction. We've spent an immense amount of time, particularly you, Mayor, pulling all this together from each one of us in a very long work session. So I think you kind of answered my question about the direction for tonight. So we're starting in where we left off that night at 11 o'clock or whatever time it was. Is that what we're doing?
I thought one direction we might take is to just go through and quickly take a look at the responses that staff offered in that attachment F, because there were a couple of those that I think do need us to make a decision or come to some agreement about.
Cool, thanks.
And beyond that, I think, if there were specific notes that council members wanted to raise in attachment F for tonight, I didn't see a lot. There were a few additions made by Susan, by Barbara, by Danny, by Randy, by myself. Sammy, of course, had done his very thorough read for the March 8th meeting, which was incredibly helpful. So I think I didn't see a lot of areas where council members were kind of disagreeing with each other. There were a couple of spots where there was a little bit of different perspective, but I think in general, what we left the last meeting, the March 8th meeting with, everybody seemed mostly fine with, in addition to the comments that we received last week and that I shared with staff. So I think it might be helpful just to go look at some of the staff's responses, especially the ones that require us to make a decision, and then so we'll see where we are, if that sounds okay to everybody. Since we've had so little to add. So what I'm going to do again, and I'm sorry to do this, but I think it does help, is to put this document back on the screen. And what I'm going to be sharing is attachment F, which you all have in your packet for tonight's meeting. And I'm going to assume that you can all see that document now, and that it's large enough for you to see, I hope. And if it's not, please shout at me. So this should look familiar to you because you all reviewed it closely last week. I appreciate your timeliness in doing that. So I thought we'd just take a quick look at, there are a few areas in red text here where staff offered a response to a comment from council members. And I would like to ask Trish, or whoever Trish thinks is the right person, to make sure that we're understanding the response from staff. But in this one, it's you can see this on your screen. It's regarding the comment on page 145. Randy and Susan had recommended removing some of these items because they don't fit the standard public park definition. Staff said a redesignation of a park should be included as part of plan implementation and should be done in the broader context of all recreation parks facilities. Not sure where people want to leave that, but here we are, open to suggestions.
If it's helpful, I can explain just the meaning of the response is that, our parks vary fairly considerably, but we do consider them to be parks, and we have designated them as such and planned for them and improve them and so forth that way. And just in considering the possibility of removing some of them from the map, and checking with recreation and park staff and discussing amongst ourselves, we felt that conversation would be the type of thing that would really benefit from a deeper dive and really consideration of it as part of implementation of the comp plan. If there is a desire to look at our parks, we would want to look at them in a more detailed comparative fashion rather than at this point.
Thanks, Trish. That's helpful. Barbara? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Trish. And is this where this comment should go, since it's about parks? I guess is my question. because this is tied in with Westwood Cemetery. Your wording is a redesignation of a park, or is it parks? Are we looking community-wide, or are we honing in on a park? That is my question. And maybe it's just the way that this is being worded, because if we're looking at adding parks or doing anything with parks, I would think it would be parks and not park. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding staff and the consultant's comment here.
Yes, thank you for the clarification. I think we really mean a redesignation of any park.
Right.
And currently, the town does have agreements with the schools, and we do use those as, I mean, people do use them as parks spaces, as well as the other facilities noted here all do. Well, the Century Center doesn't function in the same way as those ones that have outdoor spaces, but it would be, we were thinking about any park, not just a park. So
that's helpful. Thanks. I have Danny, and then Susan, and then Randy.
Thanks, Damon. Trish, do I understand this correctly, that this is really about it's sort of in the mapping and consideration of all of our parks? This is really a request to not consider some of our existing parks as parks for the purposes of our maps, right? So as to, I think, let me try and phrase this more clearly. We kind of had some disagreement over, for instance, Town Commons, very directly, whether that qualifies as a park space. I hear you loud and clear and agree that the note reflecting that needs to continue to be considered a park unless we want to pursue otherwise. Do I hear this correctly, that this is not necessarily about Westwood per se, as it is about the consideration of other facilities that Westwood has prompted? We are trying to not reclassify existing parks so as to accommodate the discussion around Westwood.
I think that is correct. I mean, we were the red text there is responding to the council member Haven O'Donnell and Remain suggesting that the removal of those from the Walkshed map was related to them not fitting a standard park definition, and our response was just we would recommend that or note that would really be something better to do later on when we're implementing the plan rather than at this point. The Walkshed map has some value for the comprehensive plan, but the further consideration of any of the park facilities and categorizing them perhaps differently would be a good thing to do if that's of an interest, doing that later, not now. It would seem to be.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Perhaps, I know that next I'm going to be calling on Susan and Randy. Perhaps as Susan and Randy speak, they can help us, like to suggest maybe whether we accept staff's note here as a good response and move on from that or not. But Susan, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Damon. I would recommend accepting staff's note here, but I would also just like to just sort of lift up something that Bob Proctor said, that when looking at the parks, first of all, just I know you're going to be doing this, but looking at the number of facilities that are being offered at those different parks, because it seems like, there's such a wide range, and also looking at the populations served by those parks. And in some cases, the parks can be Martin Luther King Park. It's open to, a very wide group. Some cases, it can be a much smaller population because the park itself is so small. So I would just ask that those two factors are looked at as we're looking at those redesignations of the parks. But I'm fine with this language here.
Susan. Randy?
Yeah, I agree. I think, thank you, staff. Thank you, Trish, for recognizing that this, our interest is better served in the implementation. What I guess I want to know is whether or not this comment and the redesignation of these parks, is that something that will be written in or to this comp plan under implementation, or is that something that is going to be tabled until the plan is in process?
I have to, if you wouldn't, I can check the implementation language right now and see if there is something that is, I mean, it's a broad description, I believe, at the moment, and Francie may be looking at this right now, but I don't, I mean, I think that as part of evaluating access to facilities and so forth, there will be a comparison of what they are, what they consist of, and trying to, and the populations that are served, you know, and Scott's got his hand up, so you might want to, he may have just looked at the plan and add some language back.
I hope Francis look at the implementation. I just wanted to point out that I think the discussion that we're having now is embedded in on page 45, 145, where it says sidebar feature criteria for parkland acquisition and capital improvements. So those are the recommendations in the plan. The watershed map is only one of those. In fact, it's listed as the last one. It's not a definitive map of the need for parks. And maybe we could add, I would suggest maybe consider adding that language to emphasize that there's a series of criteria that are important in identifying land parks. I think that was the intent of the discussion and the recommendation of the task force.
Yeah, and I think that that's what, in writing the comments, that's what the aim was. So yeah, I know I certainly would appreciate if it would show up there in print.
Damon, I'm not sure. Maybe you're saying you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that, Phil. Okay. I was saying that thanks for that, Scott and Trish. It sounds like everybody's okay with us leaving staff's note here as an acceptable response to this particular item. Sammy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight also the whole point of redesignate. The impetus behind wanting to redesignate some of those parks has to do with the sidebar feature, the last point of the third point, which is that the land or project for the criteria for parkland acquisition, that it would provide greater access to households that are currently more than a 10-minute walk from a park. The concern, as Bob Proctor was pointing out, is that there are a lot of things that are designated as parks that are either too small or don't have the features that like larger parks such as MLK or Anderson Park have, that would skew the criteria in terms of walkability, 10-minute walkability. And that's really what's underlying Bob's point, is if you include all those other places, then we won't get a proper park for serving a large part of our communities that is very historically disenfranchised, as this park would serve.
And just based on Trish's earlier response to Barbara's comment, do you mind if I just amend this comment here by, instead of saying a park, any park? I think, Trish, that was a helpful response to Barbara's question. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next staff note. If everybody's comfortable with that, see if it requires any discussion. This is a staff response to Sammy and Randy's comments here. We had already offered some an agreed upon kind of comment here, and staff just offered some additional language in response. Are any concerns about this, anyone? Randy?
Yeah, I just want to ask this, and I'm not sure I'm going to ask it succinctly. So Trish, try and read my mind here a little bit. Use best practices to minimize limitations on property owners' ability to use ADUs as a tool to maximize the value of their property and to expand housing opportunities. So one of the things that happened in Chapel Hill, not Carrboro, but in Chapel Hill, long ago, beginning in the 70s, is ADU units were built, and it was, and many units were rented by students. I know this because many students that were friends of ours were living in ADU units. And so what I'm wondering, how do we ensure that we're not creating housing for students, but creating housing that is affordable for folks in the community? Is there some way that that is that it becomes housing stock that is for our permanent population rather than students?
Really, that's I mean, it's a tough question. You know, anyone who builds an extra unit is going to spend a fair amount of money to do it. And so I think that that in and of itself raises a question. I'm just focusing on that. In that comment, I'm just going to focus on the absolute connection that about whether they could be affordably priced or whatever in the market. So that's just one side of this. But we have limited ability to control, you know, who rents a unit. And so I don't think unless, well, anyway, I'll just stop there and say that. And I think that the interests that we have heard expressed and understand are ones that we need to explore more deeply as we go forward, and just examine all of the tools we have and look and see where we can try to, I mean, there's going to be a certain demand from the student population. This is a big question in our community, obviously, because of the university being located here, and others in relatively close proximity. That is a part of, I mean, students are a part of our population, but I think there is there may be a balance point where beyond a certain point, then the units are clearly not, there's more than are needed to rent just to students, So I think we have to look at these, where we have limitations, where we have possibilities more deeply, and with regard to ADUs. Scott has some experience with this point, so I want to be sure and give him a chance to speak on this question, from his perspective.
Yeah, so there's a few different issues here. In terms of students, obviously we all know we can't discriminate against certain classes of people. I think that's what you're getting at, Trish. The idea, though, I think Councilwoman Stephen O'Donnell, that how do we make sure there's available housing for families and long-term residents? I guess that's the question. And ADUs are a tool for that. My house that I'm sitting in right now has an ADU in it that we're now using as family room. It was built for the person's mother 25 years ago. So I think the important issue about affordable housing is there's no one solution to the issue. That I think in this chapter, in the housing chapter and in the land use chapter, are recommending a number of different steps that taken together will allow for additional housing without fundamentally changing the character of neighborhoods. And ADUs is one of those tools. And so I think that the comment here is talking about both increasing the availability of housing to meet growth in the community and long-term housing, as well as an affordable housing solution. And this is getting at, should there be incentives built in, for example, lower parking standards if the unit is affordable. So that's up to council, but there's two different uses of this tool that are talked about in the Carrboro Connects draft.
Well, I guess my question is, how do we evaluate that as it goes? And, I just know what happened with Chapel Hill, and that most, if not, in fact, all of the ADU units that, well, I shouldn't say all because I can't give you numbers, but they supported student housing in the 70s and 80s. and the university wasn't building housing for students at that time. And I'm just asking this because I don't want us to be painted into a corner where we really are not making a dent in the housing stock that we are looking to create. You know, I love that we have a student community. You know, we lived in, you know, as part of the student community when we first came here. I get it, but I also understand what our objective is, and I'm just wondering if this, you know, if this goal is really aiming in the way that we want it to, or if it's going to be a, you know, if it's going to go in another direction that we're not anticipating, or that we anticipate will only have minimal impact when in fact, you know, the likelihood it may be more. I mean,
Randy, I think these are really important questions, but I think they're questions that are probably can be applied to any of the tools that are included in the plan as strategies for addressing housing availability and affordable housing. I mean, I don't think that's a particular to ADUs necessarily, but I think, as Trish said, it's something that will need to be part of the assessment when this implementation strategy becomes on the table. So I think they're good considerations for us to have, but I'm not sure that they're specific necessarily to ADUs or in particular, you know, anyway.
I guess what I'm wondering is, are there specific aspects of ADUs that we'll be able to look at in the implementation phase to determine whether or not they'd be geared more for families or for, you know, residents rather than, you know, students semester to semester?
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that that's a qualitative side of, you know, accessory dwelling units. I mean, and I think I think it's reasonable to ask the question, you know, how do you frame the use of this so that it would be more attractive to families rather than potentially to, you know, to others? And I think that that's something that that's a question we can ask, and I think you will ask it. And so, and decide accordingly, you know. I mean, we have a significant gap in terms of affordability in the community for all kinds of residents. So,
including, for example, students.
Including students, yes. But it is a big issue. And so I'm not saying that it's just students in any way, but it is, we just have such a significant gap but I think one way to do it is to be straightforward about that interest and to articulate that if that's your interest, and then to you know, qualitatively ask, how do you make this tool work better to do X or Y, perhaps?
Right, exactly. And I'm not saying don't house students, believe me, but what I'm saying is, if we have an aim and we have a number that we're trying to reach in terms of affordable housing for, you know, for families and seniors and whatever, that we, you know, how do we meet that first? Thank you both.
Randy, we have Danny and then Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much, Trish and TESCA folks. I would actually like to offer that not that the red language is not excellent. I think the red language offers, you know, a good faith engagement of a lot of the issues that you guys are hearing. But out of all of the work that you guys have to do to finalize this document, I do want to put back before us that the highlighted text does what we need it to do very well. I mean, we don't need to pin ADUs, I don't think, to any hard metrics of affordability. It's reflected throughout this entire plan that a general increase in housing stock is correlated with movement on our goals toward affordability. And so, you know, I think the way that this is phrased, with the two concerns of both affordability and also the equity concern of making sure that property owners are able to access all of the value of the property, that's there in the highlighted language. And so personally, I feel like just in the interest of expedience, I would like to accept the highlighted language with gratitude to the planning staff and TESCA for the offer to go deeper here. I just don't think it's needed.
Thank you, Danny. I think that's really a helpful observation. Barbara?
Yeah, and I'm right behind Danny as far as like the highlighted portion being what we're agreeing upon or not. I do appreciate Randy's concern. As you know, we would want everybody to have access, to ADUs and the affordability attached to them and things of that nature. I'm just not sure if this is where where we would do that, or if we even would have a way to do it. I guess that's a question too. Like, how would we even do that? But anyway, I'm good, and I was going in the direction that Councilmember Now went in, and I'm very comfortable with the highlighted text where we are right now as far as what we're trying to decide.
So given that, can I remove this additional text here with thanks to staff and just settle on what we'd already previously talked about as the highlighted agreed upon text? Okay. Right. Thanks, everyone. Going to zoom on down to the next staff note, see what we got. This just seems like an affirmation of what we kind of already agreed upon last time with the highlighted text. Any need to linger?
No, that's it.
Great. We have a mention of the staff discovered a typo, which is great. Always good to find typos. I'm just going to kind of keep scrolling here unless people see something they need to flag here in terms of staff's responses. Just affirming that the One Orange racial equity framework will inform some of this assessment here. Longer response to Sammy's comment about the word stormwater and why this language was selected. Gonna keep on scrolling, y'all, unless he stop me. This next one is actually a response to a reply that I made to Sammy's recommendation about keeping the ParkServe tools map. And what I wanted to raise here is that I think the ParkServe tool is really fun to use and can be really informative. It's also based on some limited data, and I think that I'm not sure that we want to elevate it to the status of a policy-making tool in the way that I fear this would do by including it in this way. This came up in recent discussions at the end of last year about the Green Tract, and we were considering the resolution that we adopted jointly with Chapel Hill and Orange County, where I feel comfortable with staff's ability in assessing our parks and recreation resources to identify where our gaps are and where we where additional work be needed. So that's why I made this comment here. Just wanted to recommend that we not include the ParkServe tool. So I have Barbara. Is your hand up for this item, or is that just left from last time?
Oh, I was just hanging out. Sorry.
Danny, and then Sammy.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to just support your position here. I do think, so we've talked a lot about this ParkServe map, and the previous discussion teed this up well. I think it's reassuring to hear from staff that we have a lot of room to have a qualitative reconsideration of all of our parks and facilities. And I'm hearing that our staff are perfectly capable of doing that with the non-ParkServe map, the map before the ParkServe. I do understand potential concerns around like not using the ParkServe map because it makes it look like the southern part of town in particular is better served than it is. But I just want to note, it sounds like that's not a real concern. And I totally agree that this kind of open sourced, non-town sourced map that has often been used in other conversations to promote, less than responsible land use. I think we should stick with what's in the plan and just really make sure that we are accountable to each other in good faith, that we're making sure we serve every part of town.
Okay, Sammy?
Yeah, so I don't know the history in terms of the green track in regard to the park serve, or even the specifics of how the park serve gathers its data. But my understanding is that either staff or the consultant did have park serve in this, and that it was taken out. And so I'd be curious to hear from staff or the consultant what was the cause for taking that map out. What the context or reason was for bringing it out in the first place. And I agree, Bob Proctor's main point in wanting to keep the park serve map is that it does a better job than the walkability map in terms of recognizing populations that aren't served by parks and the qualitative aspect of those populations. So I think in contrast to a walkability map, there's something that the park serve map does provide. But yeah, if we could be providing that separately and through some other process, I'm all for it. But I'm still curious to understand why park serve was included originally and what led to taking it out thereafter.
Thank you, Sammy. Francie.
Sure, and Trish and Scott, please chime in as needed. I believe the park serve map doesn't include Carolina North Forest and several other community facilities that we would consider to be recreational spaces and green spaces. So that was kind of a major element missing that made the analysis no longer specific and relevant to Carrboro. So we did use it originally. And then after further public input and reviewing with the task force, we decided to move to this 10-minute walk shed map as a replacement.
Thanks, Francie.
Thank you.
Sammy's, that's really helpful, Francie. And Sammy, thanks for asking that question. I do take Sammy's point about, just sort of reaffirming that whichever tool staff is able to use in the context of our overall recreation and parks facilities, we want to be mindful of really identifying where gaps are, and especially for particular communities that are already underserved. So I don't know if we need to capture that here, or if we all feel comfortable that that's already being captured in previous areas of the plan. But I think that is an important point.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be good to include that because we are including the walkability map, and I don't want it to be the metric, I guess. Is that the right way for using metric? The metric for whether we're achieving our goal. We want to go a little deeper.
Sammy, can you suggest a quick comment here to include, just to note the point you're making?
Just we want to be able to assess park, where to cite parks beyond walkability, including data such as population, amenities of the park, income levels of population served, et cetera.
So hours that the park is open.
Is this capturing the general point okay, Sammy? I'm not hearing anything more, so I'm going to assume that's okay. Okay. All right, thanks for that. The next one is a comment in response to one of Sammy's notes here. Teska or staff, do you want to take us through this quick comment to make sure we're understanding? Or maybe I should ask Sammy if he takes the note as it is and is okay with that.
Yeah, I think again the importance here is to not have the map be the end all, that clarification be meaningful in this document so that we remember that.
I'll leave this response from staff here as an indication of that. Okay. All right, keeping on scrolling. I'll just note here that in the previously agreed to highlighted portion, I did amend the last bullet under general here to reflect the comment that Barbara shared in her responses last week to make sure that that was contained here. Especially the importance of historical context.
And Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. And so I appreciate Susan, coming in and, she talked about the systemic inequities and institutional racism and all that. And so when I read the email that all the rest of us have read as well about centering BIPOC folk, the historical context is really important, like I said here, as far as folks understanding why we're doing that. I mean, even why we're using climate change and environmental justice, the mitigation around both of those as a pillar, and a foundation for the plan. So I think, to just really maybe expound on that, just a little bit more, I think would be helpful. And that's the point that Susan and I were getting at.
Yeah, it's a really important point.
Thank you, Mayor.
These two next responses from staff. One is a question that I had raised a question about in what way our existing affordable housing goals and strategy document would be referenced or relied upon. And I do appreciate staff's response here, and I don't have any further comment unless anybody else does. The next one is a staff response to a comment from Barbara, which was also about making sure to reference the affordable housing goals and strategies. It sounds like staff's getting the point here, so appreciate that. Next is a response to a comment from Sammy, and just reiterating some other language that we agreed upon in our March 8th meeting that I think gets at what Sammy's noting here. The next is also a response to one of Sammy's comments. Seems okay. This is again, this issue of future determinations about recreation facilities and so on, accessibility, and will have to be part of that plan implementation. We kind of talked about this in the beginning of our conversation today. Next is I think it's the same issue actually, so we can probably keep going. Next is Randy and I had commented on the language that will be used to refer to the Bowling Creek conceptual master plan. In some separate conversation, and something that I added here as a response to Randy, is I think it would be smart of us to just make sure that whatever language we're using here is consistent with what we already sort of settled on as a council back when we updated the bike plan. We spent a lot of time and energy, nailing that language down, and I think it would be smart of us to just stick with that language rather than trying to change it up in. Next is a response to a Sammy comment about, sorry, Randy, did you have a comment? You're on mute, Randy, we can't hear you. Randy, you're still on mute.
Okay, sorry, thank you for pointing that out. So what are we saying here with 149 on the sidebar feature? Will we go with the consistency rather than the staff consult notes, or?
What I'm suggesting is we should use the exact same language so that we're not confusing people. We spent a lot of time in the bike plan update coming up with language, and we should just echo that here so that there's not any confusion.
Yeah, do we have a copy of what that is?
It's right. It's this italicized red text here.
Okay, so is it the whole? Okay, that's what I was wondering. So
the exact same language from the bike plan.
While Randy's reading it, and so we've not even, it's just, we've not talked about it. There's nothing. It's just been, and I assume, Mayor, at some point we will, I presume. Yeah, although now it's not the time to decide that. I was just saying. Thank you.
Okay.
That actually was decided more than a year ago, Barbara, a resolution asking our manager for us to have that discussion. So it's overdue.
And that was, I'm sorry, Sammy, that was David, right? When
Yeah.
David was still
Yeah.
here? Okay.
Yeah.
And we just haven't scheduled it, I guess. Thank you, Sammy.
As long as this language is taken from that, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just confirm as part of this note, then I think Tesca and the staff are hearing this, that we want this language in this sidebar to echo the language word for word that's in the bike plan.
Yeah, in the current bike plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, staff is responding to a comment from Sammy, clarifying that watershed residential zoning district is the only one limited to single family residences.
Yeah, so the I think the thing there is let me find that on mine. I think that the interest is also in the same way that single family is allowed everywhere, but multifamily isn't necessarily, for us to have an opportunity to consider switching that around. In other words, prioritizing multifamily over single family. As it's being recognized more and more as an affordable housing form of providing homes, more so than single family historically has been.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. I think the way that I've kind of approached this question, and it sort of prompted me to make this comment in response to what staff has offered here, is that while it may be true that the watershed residential zoning district is the only one where it's restricted to single family residences, it is the case that in many, if not all, residential districts, uses other than single family residences require a higher bar of permitting. So the point isn't so much that there's, that say duplexes, quadplexes, whatever aren't allowed in certain zoning districts, is that you have to go through more hoops to get there than you would for a single family residence. I think to me, that's the central point.
Yeah, I totally agree. But flip that on its head, like, make single family have to go through more hoops versus multifamily. I think the time is right to change the way we do single family versus multifamily.
If I could just clarify that the distinction is based on density now. So anybody over 4 units needs to get a special use permit. Anyone who wants to build more than 4 units, but a duplex doesn't require a special use permit on one lot. But anything over 4 units on any property to create a subdivision or a unified development. So I think that considering tools to incentivize different housing types can include permitting and other things, as well as, of course, just the question of density. But does that make sense? I mean, if you want to build 4 single family houses, you can do it with a zoning permit. If you want to build a building with 4 apartments in it or a quadruplex, you can do it with a zoning permit. But if you want to build 5 of either of those in one approval, that requires a special use permit. So we have our bar is very immediate for very small projects to have to go through a quasi-judicial process,
right,
regardless of whether it's single family or multifamily.
It feels like just maybe saying here, kind of echoing some language you just used, Trish, here, that we need to explore, we need to have tools to incentivize residential development other than single family residence. Very general for the purposes of these notes to staff. Okay. All right. Moving on. Sammy, this is another response from staff to a comment from you.
Yeah, I mean, some of these comments I took from comments that were made to us from members of the public. I don't remember exactly who did this one. It may have been Patrick McDonough, but yeah, I think as long as we are somehow like remembering that there's some more analysis that has to happen. And I think that's fine. I just never know to what degree things need to be more explicit in the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan, I feel, could be looked at as like, this is what y'all decided, so why do you want to do something different? And I don't want us to find ourselves in that kind of situation, because there's a lot to be further developed that isn't, unfortunately, done through the comprehensive plan, because it's already comprehensive enough, and we're asking for it to be even more.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. That's helpful. So how about this idea? This last sentence of staff's response feels like a key thing that gets at what you're wanting, which is staff and consultants can make changes to the plan to provide greater transparency and highlight where those proposed changes are included. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Just echo that here in what council would like to see.
Sorry, Damon, one more point here related to the future land use map that has to do with a previous one that I gave a thumbs up to, the Sammy 10 comment. One of the frustrations I have, and I feel I'm echoing with a lot of other people who've commented to us with a comprehensive plan, is the way in which the land use map very much stops far short of a broad stroke approach of how we envision where development and how the town can grow without the like granularity of a specific landowner having input in terms of what that vision is. I think that we kind of tie our hands by doing that. It's a tricky thing, because as we've seen, for example, with affordable housing, with the land that the town owns, we express an intention of a process to assess the viability of our own land to do that. But members of the public, for example, hear that and they're like, the town's already decided it. So I understand why there's a hesitancy to include a bolder map in a comprehensive plan. But what we're missing by not doing that is, starting from somewhere in terms of like, this is a vision, and thereafter, like, the opportunity to tweak that map for according to the conversation that we have with the community that is prompted by that map itself.
Scott, did you have a comment in response to that?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Slade. We've talked quite a bit about this among staff consultants because, as you said, there have been a number of comments. I don't think we were very clear why the corridors were chosen, and that they were chosen specifically because those were areas of town with transit or the potential for transit in the northern part that could accommodate more growth. I don't think we say that very clearly. And then in each corridor, there are broad statements about additional density and then specific sites chosen. So that's what we meant about transparency, that in the next draft, we think we can make that clear that these are areas of the town that can experience and absorb growth. At the same time, it has to be done sensitively in terms of infrastructure, stormwater, and sustainability, and all of those things. And so, yes, some comprehensive plans will have big bubbles in town showing additional density. This is a more nuanced approach. We didn't think that really fit the nature of engagement in Carrboro. But that said, the plan can be clear that this plan is calling for additional growth and development, particularly not only, but particularly in these corridors where there's transit or the potential for greater transit.
Is there a way in which to link what you just said with the estimates for what the population growth will be, and to what degree those identified corridors will be sufficient to accommodate that growth in population? Because that's kind of at the heart of this specific comment here.
Kind of a chicken and the egg problem.
Yeah, it's a really great question. The answer is I don't think at this time we'd be able to do that because of the fact that these are generally developed corridors. I mean, there could be assumptions on units per acre, et cetera, but we're trying to change the units per acre. So the foundation of the goal of the plan obviously was very much based on race and equity and climate action. There wasn't a specific population goal for the plan. That said, in going forward, there can be estimates taken. We did look at population forecasts that were done by UNC and the state and the Economic Development Agency. So we use that as background in the initial papers. But the plan isn't trying to achieve a specific population. Rather, it's about trying to accommodate people of lower income, and that there are policy goals in the plan that we're driving the plan more so than a specific population goal. That doesn't mean going forward, there can't be more metrics and measurements to see how well the plan is actually accommodating growth versus not accommodating growth.
Right, thanks. And maybe that's that language, something to speak to that as a placeholder could be useful for prompting us to keep that in mind as we go forward in terms of like how to accommodate. This plan doesn't go there all the way, but it opens the road in that direction.
Danny? I think Randy.
Yeah, I did.
Earlier, so I'm going to skip to Danny real quick.
I did just want to, and thanks, Scott. I think helping with some of those narrative elements and anchoring within the plan will be very valuable here. But I do think some of this, Sammy, I share some of these concerns about being direct about like population growth and stuff like this. But I think the implementation chapter is also like a helpful referent here, where as some of what's reflected in the below comments with our zoning. If we look at the first 18 months of implementation on land use, we have both the underlying zoning, the by right zoning that we, ask the consultants to keep in here as both pursued. And then we have an update to our maps, like in pursuant with those changes within the first 18 months there. So all that is to say, I think like that numerical benchmark is going to continue to be missing. But I think some of the concrete things that are not, it's just kind of hard to get my head around A to B to C within the goals chapter. Seem to make a little more sense to me within implementation.
Thanks, Dan. So what I've done here is I've copied and pasted staff's sort of indication here that they can make some changes to this draft to provide that kind of transparency and so on that Scott just explained. Is that clear enough for staff and Scott? I saw nodding heads. All right, moving on. The next one is another, again, a response to a comment by Sammy about the maps, about density and growth and so on. I feel like this is similar to the conversation for the previous comment, same points. So unless I saw Scott and Sammy both nodding, which is always a good sign. All right. Next, any comments, further comments here, Sammy? This response to your no, okay. Going down again to this question of zoning for specific housing types. This gets to the point that Trish made earlier about that the zoning is really about density of housing rather than specific types. I think the same comment as above applies, is that we need more tools for incentivizing certain kinds of residential development other than single family residential. So it might actually be worth me just stating that here again, which I will do with the handy paste function. Coming down to this comment from Sammy about the Jones Ferry Road small area plan. Any further questions about what staff has offered here, Sammy? Or anyone else?
Yeah, no, that's sufficient. Thank you, staff and consultant.
Great. We had a number of suggestions from council. I'm sorry, Randy. And Randy, you're on mute.
I wrote some notes about that, so I didn't realize it was coming up just now. I guess let's see. Notes on this, because I did write something about this. I'm going to look over my notes. Let's go on and,
Okay.
but I did.
Move on to Susan.
have
And
a
come back to
comment.
you in a second. Yep.
Yeah.
Susan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if my comment belongs here or not. It's actually related to where it says Sammy 27, but it's still about the Jones Ferry Road Small Area Plan.
Okay.
And I was just going to suggest, Sammy, in this section that we actually reference the new study, the new parking study that we'll soon be learning about. And basically just saying that we'll be looking at that parking study to, guide us with in terms of looking for increasing alternative ways for accessing the downtown.
I mean, the only worry about that is something in the future that we would be referencing that no one has seen yet. So I'd be wary of doing that for that reason. Whereas the previous parking study, my point there is basically the previous parking study did not say, do more structured parking. It said as needed, do no more structured parking. So that's why I'm suggesting that we strike that out.
Susan, I wonder, and Sammy, if it might be worth saying something rather than making a sort of definitive statement about how that study will inform decision making. We might just refer to the fact that there is a study ongoing, which may offer additional information to answer these questions. Right? It's not sort of saying one way or the other that we know anything about what that study is saying at this time.
Yeah, that's the point. That study, hopefully, I mean, again, I don't know if it's going to help, to what degree it'll help us, but the hope and the intention as we commissioned that study originally was that it would facilitate us getting to the language that I'm essentially adding there.
How's this comment?
I'm good with that. I wouldn't, yeah, I appreciate that. I just wanted to reference that study that it will be guiding us.
Got it. Sorry, Susan, I don't think fully understanding what you were asking there, but I'm glad Damon got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Randy, did you
Yeah. Well, before I go to the 5.1, yeah, I agree that making reference to the ongoing study and the most updated information is critical regarding the parking study. But with the 5, can I speak to the 5.1?
Yes, please.
Yes. So, the recommendations to add, like a call out box for the rural buffer to provide an explanation and the context why the town urges dense development and with
Hey,
our
Randy,
municipal
interrupt you
boundaries.
real quick. Can you point me to where you are? Oh, you're down here at the bottom. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's why I said, you ready for me to ask about that?
Yeah, sorry about that.
So
Yeah,
just,
I'm assuming since no one else commented on the comment that you and Susan included here on this topic, that meant I sort of took that, as with all the other places where people didn't offer additional comment, that council members were generally fine with the suggestion that was offered.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the approach I took to this document.
Uh-huh.
Unless people called it out as having a problem with it or a question about it, then everybody was pretty much okay with it.
perfect. Thank
Cool. All right. And so along the way, getting sort of toward the bottom of page 17 here, council members have offered a few other suggestions about notes and items to include in the glossary. So those are here. Those seem pretty straightforward as suggestions. All right. Well, we made it to the end there. So before we move on, I want to call on Danny, who raised his hand.
Yeah, I don't know if this is really the place for this. We didn't talk a lot about it. But just in this past week, I say this mostly for public who are listening. We've heard a lot about really drilling down on like accountability and making sure that we follow through on these metrics. And I really have appreciated that feedback, and I think it's really well founded. I found it easy to get a little bit lost in the first 10 chapters. They can be pretty big, and the strategies and goals are very chewy, and we all want to make sure that our passions are reflected in there. But that implementation plan in chapter 11, if you are watching this at home, and you're wondering, what does this really mean? I have found that to be such a clear, really wonderful document. And I wanted to just thank Trish and thank Tesca. I think if we look at chapter 11 and we trace it back through a lot of this red text, we really have a good couple steps here as a town to take for the next 18 and 24 months that will help us bite down on a tremendous amount of this stuff. And it's true that, of course, we, as a town have to indulge verbs like consider and inspect and all those kinds of things. But if you look at the way that they're sequenced, I'm just very grateful for the efforts of our consultants and for our planning department. And I really think that the nature of this discussion as a council has necessarily not focused on the implementation plan, as we've kind of made sure that everything else got there. I just didn't want it to get short shrift, that we have some pretty clear steps to take as a result of this document, and that those steps are a result of the really good work of our staff and consultants. And so I'm very grateful for that, and just encourage anybody who's watching at home to please spend some time with chapter 11.
Thanks for that, Danny. That's a great point. And I agree. When I was finally in a place in my head to get to chapter 11 and really take a look at that kind of multi-page thing that I wanted to paste up on a wall just to get a sense of it. I mean, it is a really useful, in a way, it's a useful way of guiding yourself through the entire document. So I appreciate that comment very much. Susan?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I appreciate those comments too. And I share in all of the gratitude to Trish, Scott, the planning team, the Comprehensive Plan Task Force, everybody who has weighed in on it. In terms of Chapter 11, I did have one question. There's a lot there, and it's very ambitious. And my question is, do we need to have more specifics around staffing? I know there have been references to staffing in the comprehensive plan. But do we need to have more specifics in terms of we need X number of employees in planning department to carry this out? We need X number of people, adding on X number of people in our housing and community services. I'm curious if there's been discussion about trying to have a little bit more detail in terms of staffing we'll need to be able to really fully implement this, because I know we're understaffed right now, even heading into the adoption of the plan. And so I'm concerned that with, given how ambitious this plan is, will we be able to go ahead and implement things in a somewhat timely way?
Thank you, Susan. And I expect that our town manager has some good things to say on that.
Can I weigh in before
Sure.
Mr. White, please? It's right with Mayor Pro Tem Romaine. And so it's concerning to me because of the way it's worded in the introduction of the implementation plan. It says all implementation items are contingent on resources and staff time and will be reevaluated and measured for necessary adjustments. So I understand the reasoning behind why, you might want to put that in there, but the public, our community. So we're putting this work out, but this visioning document, and the implementation plan and everything, but we have this little caveat in here. We're saying, hey, you know what, we might not have enough staff and resources, to finish the job. We might have to say wait, or that we can't do it altogether. So I'm following up on what Mayor Pro Tem Romaine just said, and it is concerning. And do we want to even have that in there? Do we need to? Do we want to reword it? It's kind of concerning. And I think Randy had said something, had a comment about that as well. So, yeah. So, Mr. White, your turn.
Thank you, Barbara. Richard?
Thank you. Yes, I do think that it does warrant some staffing analysis. It is an ambitious chapter, if you will. And I do think in the next year or so, as we think about all the work and the plans we have, priorities, and that implementation plan, that I would propose we do some type of staff analysis to make sure that we do have the appropriate resources to really move that plan and other initiatives for the town forward as well.
One thing was occurring to me as I read through some of that as well is, some of these kinds of activities that are described in the plan are things that the town might, for example, hire a consultant to help do, right? So there are all kinds of options. I think it's important. It's going to be really important for us to continue to make sure that our planning staff and other departments have the resources they need, the staff and other resources they need to do this work, as well as to do all the other work that we know that they're already, have on their plates. But there may be other ways to get at that as well. I think Susan and Barbara's comments were really well taken, though, and I don't know if that needs to be called out in a different way in the plan as it is, or if it's appropriate to just note that we are saying here that this is our plan and here's how we intend to implement it, but we don't have the resources and staff to do it. Got to fix that problem first. Barbara?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for bringing that home. So I don't know. I don't care for the way it's worded. It just seems like it. We may do it if we have it, and if we don't, we won't. I mean, I don't know what the intent is. But maybe we can figure out, another way to word it, or is it necessary for us to say that? That's really my question. This plan we're pushing forth to the community. It's a very ambitious plan. It has a lot of things in it that folks are looking for. And I realize, like the mayor said, from time to time we may call in a consultant, to do some of the heavy lifting, or whatever. But, in the end, it's on us, and not the consultant, because that's who the community will be looking for. They'll be looking for us. So, so with that being said, do we want to leave it in there? Do we want to reword it? Is there something, Mr. White might want to recommend? I see, I see Francie and I see Danny, Mayor. So it's on you, whoever you call next. But I just want to share that. Thank you.
Danny, you have to speak next, unless Francie, you wanted to directly respond, but I think Danny might have a comment here.
Well, I wonder whether, so we've got this, the $ metric here, and Mr. White is talking about, producing like a staffing report and a staffing load report. I wonder if there's any way, and I could definitely take a note here, Tesca and planning department, is there any way to reflect like the staff needs or capacity relative to existing baseline in a similar way that we've reflected the overall resources? That's probably getting a little fine grained, but we had this $ metric, and I wonder if there's just kind of like a roughly correspondent way to say, like, we'll need more staff to do this.
Francie, do you want to tackle that?
I think I'll let Trish speak to that, but I just wanted to clarify in case anyone didn't have that page, that introduction page on the implementation chapter in front of them. The sentence right before the one that Councilmember Fouché mentions says, the decisions of the town council will guide these priorities over time based on available resources and continued community input and outreach. So that speaks a little bit to the resources piece, but doesn't necessarily go as far as to say all items are contingent on that. So I just wanted to note that.
And thank you. But we still need to do something with that sentence, for real.
And I think it's one, and I appreciate that too, Francie, that it reminds us too, I think, that a lot of what's in this comprehensive plan is work that is already ongoing or contemplated by existing adopted plans, like the bike plan, like the affordable housing goals and strategies, like, you name it. This was meant in part to encompass all of those existing adopted plans. And we know that the staff is already doing a lot of great work as part of those existing plans, right? So it's not as if everything listed here is a brand new initiative or a brand new activity. A lot of it is a reflection of existing and ongoing activities. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. Trish, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think that I wanted to just first of all say that, our processes can be involved sometimes, but things can also move expeditiously. And, just looking at the way things have been implemented when the town had its land use plan first adopted, a lot happened in just a few years. A comprehensive rezoning of the town, development of a brand new, land use ordinance. Lots of things can actually happen, but I do think that it is we have, as you noted, there's more than one way to skin a cat. No, I don't want to skin any cats. Forgive me, honestly. But there are our staff and then other resources potentially. But and I think one thing we do need to add here, and that is the expectation about the 1-year updates, the reporting on that, and really this being a methodical process of checking in and examining our milestone, how we hit the milestones. And, this is an adjustment. And as you've noted just now, that we do have a number of plans that we are implementing right now, affordable housing goals and strategies. We're already working on those efforts, the community climate action plan and the bike plan specifically, and as well as, economic sustainability. So some very recently adopted sets of policies that have been guiding us. And in any case, I do think that we want to probably incorporate some language about that sort of recognition of the method of our working forward. I think that this language was sort of meant just as and I don't disagree with changing it or removing it really, but I just think it just is in every case what you all do in the town, there is a consideration of resources, and it doesn't have to be necessarily staff time. It could simply say resources, but because who knows how you might have to deploy them at some point because something we may face. So in some respects, it's just kind of a recognition of whatever circumstances we can't foresee. But anyway, I do think that it is going to be an adjustment for us to have a comp plan and to be organizing ourselves as a town, as our town departments under this approach. And I'm not saying that will add time to it, but it just means that we'll do things hopefully in some methodical way that may help the community very clearly see how things are moving forward. And there may be some adjustments to the schedules here. I would anticipate that there may be, because some things may become more involved. Other things may move more, as I said, expeditiously. So.
Thank you, Trish. So let me say a couple of points here. One is we had previously, under the general comments category, we had previously agreed to some language about the point that Trish just made about being transparent about how there will be these regular check-ins, the frequency of updates to the plan, how that will be reported out to the council and to the community over time, how the plan will evolve over time. So this might be an opportunity, as I've done here, to paste that comment in here as well, just as a reminder. And maybe implementation plan introduction is an opportunity to, again, say that. Is there some direction or suggestion we can offer staff here, getting more to the comment that Barbara and Susan raised about this issue of contingency on resources and staff and so on, and getting at what Trish has just shared as well. Trish.
I did want to just speak to Councilmember Knoll's point about some, I'll call it maybe its level of difficulty or in relation to staff resources. So it may be that we've got a cost category. We might just want to try and normalize what we think is the level of difficulty associated with that. Do you see what I'm saying, Francie? Just another thing we might say, like, how many barbells is it to do this task? Is it 1? Is it 2? Something like that. Because I do think that is helpful, just at a glance, to see what effort might be involved. Does that seem like something might be helpful in response to that question, rather than trying to say it in terms of staff, just because it may be staff, but it may be, and we would turn that into what does it take? What is the level of difficulty? How much does it take to do that?
Right. Thanks, Trish.
I don't know. It's a thought.
Yeah.
Just quickly, Trish, what you reminded me is the way the task force came up with these priority steps was looking at level of difficulty versus impact. Right. And so that these were chosen to have a mix of things that might be a little easier to implement and those things that might be harder, but would have greater long-term impact. So maybe there's a way to reflect those two elements in because something might be more expensive, might take more staff, but is going to have a greater impact across multiple areas than other items that might be easier to implement, but won't have that same impact.
Thank you for the reminder on that. Yep.
Susan?
Yes, I was just going to go back, Trish, to what you said earlier about the regular check-ins. It sounds like yearly. So I wondered about adding in here that the updates will include, the plan should really be guiding our budget each year, right? We're going to be looking at these updates on how we're doing. And I assume those updates will help guide us as we develop our budget and decide, do we need to be hiring more employees? So I was going to ask about including some mention of the budget in this implementation.
Does that get at what you're saying, Susan? Include a note that the plan will help guide budget development. Thank you. Barbara, are you still in line again?
Yeah, because I just want to know if the sentence is going to be taken out or not. That's what I'm interested in for something that may be more palatable to the public, to our community, that we're all here to serve. So that's what I'm thinking about, because I mean, there've been several comments about that already, whether we're biting off more than we can chew. And so, I mean, I just would like to have us, to cover all of our bases. And so I just wanted to kind of end up with that. I did like the idea about the level of difficulty of implementation, from the staff perspective. But I don't know how the community will receive that. I mean, we're putting all this information out, this very large visioning document with an implementation plan. So I'm concerned about how it lands on community and just how they'll receive it.
Thanks, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Are there suggestions about how to tackle that sentence that Susan and Barbara have called out as worrying? And I see that Randy has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm not so much looking to offer language for that sentence. I think, as Barbara says, I think we can take out that sentence, but have something constructed that really, says that with each update, there will be the level of difficulty in staff resources will be communicated. And, and then we can have the barbell icons, which I think if we have a little image of Trish lifting barbells would be very effective. But I think just acknowledging there that, staff, as part of the updates, there will be, a information generated to community on the level of difficulty in the staff resources.
Yeah.
Because I think that way folks understand the practical side, and that we're conveying that this is a work over time. And I think people understand that, rather than saying the sentence that the decisions will be made. No, that kind of says we're creating an out for ourselves, but putting it squarely in terms of the relationship between the resources and level of difficulty and the time that something, because everything will not, take the same amount of time. As you yourself pointed out, Damon, there's things that are already in progress. So I think that's
thanks for that, Randy. That's helpful. Let me offer an idea here. What I just pasted here in quotation marks is the existing sentence. All implementation items are contingent on resources and staff time, and will be reevaluated and measured for necessary adjustments. Kind of going off of what Barbara and Susan and Randy have said here, what if this were modified to say that all implementation items, or start out by saying, as part of regular updates to the plan, all implementation items will be reevaluated and measured for necessary adjustments. And
express level of difficulty in staff resources.
Yeah, and I've got that here included here too. Does that make sense to people? And Trish, I'd appreciate any feedback you have about that language as well.
I think it's I think it's a helpful clarification, actually. I think that is the intention, and I think it's, and I guess an expectation as well. That, I mean, that's a reasonable expectation to me.
Okay, so change sentence to something like, as part of regular reporting and updates to the plan, all implementation items will be reevaluated and measured for necessary adjustments. See Susan's head nodding. Barbara, what do you think about that modification? Just
As part of our regular reporting updates to the plan, all implementation items will be reevaluated and measured for necessary adjustments. That's okay.
I took out the contingency part that seemed to be kind of
which makes it read better. Yes. Thank you.
I'll just be clear that we're talking about the final sentence in the intro paragraph. Embarrassed to have you all watching me type. I'm horrible typist.
Making the mayor work hard, man. He working out. They need a personal assistant.
Live on television. Okay, great. Let's feeling good about where we are now. So thanks for that, everyone. All right. Well, we made it through this document. I'm going to just sort of restate something I kind of said earlier, which is my understanding and my expectation is that what we do here, what remains in the document, including what we've added during this discussion, things that we've said, check mark 2 from staff's notes to us in their review of it. Everything that remains in the document, everything is stuff that we've decided we're cool with being in the document. That these are our notes to the staff about as they move into this revision stage. And so I saw a lot of nodding heads when I said that, so I think we got to a good place with all of that content. I'm very happy about that. I'm going to kind of remove the highlighting and all that stuff, and just to indicate that everything in the document these are our notes to the staff, just to reiterate. So thank you for that. And I guess I'll just want to echo a couple of things that Danny and others said earlier. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for getting us here. And especially last week, every one of you was very prompt about getting us your comments. And that made it possible for us to get all that together, get it to staff so that they had at least a day or two to look through it and respond to us, which I think was really helpful for tonight. Especially thankful to, in the previous week, Sammy did a lot of really close reading of several sections of the document, which was, I think, put us in a really good spot. So Sammy, thank you for that. And again, thanks to other council members for then jumping in and doing the same in those later iterations of our conversation. I also think, one of the chapters that always stands out to me when I'm looking at this document is chapter 2 on community engagement. We have a lot of thanks to give to our community for creating this draft plan. And that chapter itself is a real amazing record of the public's engagement in this process for the last 2 years, and in the multiple drafts and revisions that the community has seen of different pieces of this plan. So we'd have to be, I think, really grateful to our community for that work. And then finally, thanks to staff and to our TESCA team. It's been very patient, especially these last couple meetings when we've gone through this literally line by line from all of our notes. But I mean, just this whole process has been, we wouldn't be here without Trish and Ben and the rest of the planning staff, without the TESCA team. And I know I appreciated that round of review by all the departments on the draft. So we had really staff from every department in town commenting on, reviewing this plan and commenting on the things that were important to them. So I'm going to highlight the role of staff in making this possible for us to do. The thing that we need to do before we get off of this item is we need to approve the resolution that is in attachment A. I would suggest that as part of that, we state as part of that resolution that we are incorporating this updated version of attachment F that we've been typing into tonight during our conversation, and that will constitute our notes to the staff on this draft. So I would entertain a motion to approve attachment A with the incorporation of these notes that we've been working on tonight. See a motion from Barbara. Is there a second? By Danny. moved by Barbara, seconded by Danny, that we approve the resolution in attachment A, incorporating all of the comments in the document that I will send to the clerk for staff to dig into. Any further discussion?
I have just one question, Mayor. When do we approve all of the other plans that we are folding into this? So bicycle plan, community action, when do those get approved in this process?
Yeah, re-adopted is I think what they said to us. Trish, can you answer that question?
I think our plan right now is to come back with this, I think, on May 10th. With what will be the designed version of this plan, not the Word version of it. So there will be a resolution that accompanies that item for adoption, but it will also reference those other plans that are being readopted by reference. I'm not sure whether we'll call them appendices or not to this document, but we may. So it'll be at that time. The intention will be that when you adopt this plan, that's when you'll have that resolution. So if you don't do it that night, if you decide to wait, for a couple of weeks or whatever, hopefully not, but that you do those both together.
Thank you, Trish.
Thanks, Trish. All right, we have a motion and a second by Barbara and Danny. I'll do a roll call vote. Barbara.
Aye.
Randy.
Aye.
Danny.
Aye.
Susan.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
Damon, I vote aye. The matter passes unanimously. Trish, Scott, Francie, Ben, wherever Ben is, thank you so much for bearing with us as we got through this. I think we had a really productive couple of work sessions here. So thanks again.
Thanks to all of you.
Okay.
Very much.
We'll move on to any matters by council members, if there are any. Randy, and then Sammy.
Yes, I just want to remind folks that we're nearing the end of March, and the recycling center in Chapel Hill at University Place is going to close down at the end of May. Carrboro still does not have one. We don't think about the importance of this recycling to our Carrboro Community Climate Action Plan. What could we be doing better than we are doing to try and secure space, not only in Carrboro, but maybe also working with Chapel Hill? I'm really concerned the window is going to close on Chapel Hill just like it did on Carrboro, and we're going to lose a lot of the recycling behaviors that we have been lauded and awarded for over the decades.
Thanks, Randy. Mr. Manager, have you been in any conversations about this issue recently with either with Chapel Hill or with Orange County?
I have not, but I'll be sure to start one tomorrow.
Great, thanks so much. Sammy and then Danny.
Yeah, thanks, Randy, for raising that. And one of the things that has to happen, it's a county function, really the county and the SWAC team, the Solid Waste Advisory team needs to, and maybe y'all as representatives need to propose that some budgeting happening for the actual purchase of space, because so far we've just been relying on the goodwill of private lot owners. And I think it really is a resource that we need to be serious about, and to be serious about it, we need to allocate the appropriate funds for it, and thereafter buy the land to do it in an urban setting for both Chapel Hill and Carrboro. But what I wanted to talk about was, we've gone through various iterations of COVID and find ourselves often all at once, everyone in the country scrambling for scarce resources, whether it be masks or testing. And I think we have an opportunity, a very short window before this next wave, to really put our ducks in order. In other words, procure as best we can masks right now when folks aren't scrambling for masks. And also make sure that the PCR facilities don't close because we are about to have this wave. And help ourselves by maximizing the bits of still available funding and purchasing with those funding, federal funds that are allocated for rapid test provisions and masks. Folks can, through their pharmacies currently, if you have insurance, get rapid tests. And I think as a town, it's our responsibility to promote and encourage folks to get their monthly tests right now before those tests dry up. And also the website that you can apply for those tests to be sent to your house directly. And, there's another wave of those tests being made available. So just really encourage staff to make use of our social media to raise awareness and encourage folks to maximize access to those resources. Unfortunately, the federal government in its latest budget did not allocate the billions of dollars that were intended towards combating COVID because there was a sense that COVID was over once again. So let's not do Groundhog Day again, and take advantage of this calm before the storm to get people prepared.
Thanks for that, Sammy. That's really good suggestions. And I will just say that yesterday, was it yesterday? I'm losing all sense. It's within the last day or two. I think it was yesterday. The mayors and the chair did meet with Quintana Stewart, the health director, just to have a check-in meeting before our next sort of big usual meeting. We did talk a little bit about some of those issues, including what the state's next step is going to be in terms of maintaining testing facilities, vaccination facilities, and so on. So she is getting some more information about that. I will bring up this topic that you just mentioned with both Quintana and with the manager and Chief Schmidt about what are our current supplies of some of these other like masks and so on, and see what might be available for us to expand if we need to. Thanks for that. Randy.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, Sammy. I would like the manager to schedule a time when OWASA folks could come in and talk with us about two topics. One being wastewater and the COVID detection in our local wastewater. Sammy raised some continuing questions about the data that we're getting from that and what we're seeing locally, and I went through some of the materials that were sent, but I'd like to hear from OWASA. We haven't heard from them in a while. And second, Sammy, I'm just going to bring this back up because we never had the resolution on this issue the way we wanted. And it has to do with Jordan Lake for emergency water. And I think we really need to have clarification from OWASA on what the plan is and our position on it. Because we know that the Haw River that empties into Jordan Lake is rife with PFAS, and this is not something that they're going to come and tell us. We're going to need to call them in and say, what's going on with this, because this is not acceptable.
Thanks, Randy.
And,
I will note that there was a presentation to the county commissioners in the last month by OWASA about their long-term water supply plan. So there are a couple of county commissioners who, as you know, are very attuned to that particular issue that you've raised, and we are, I think, keeping an eye on it. I think it's pretty clear that, at least from some of us in Carrboro especially, and certainly from some county commissioners, that there's concern about that plan to go to Jordan Lake in the way that they've proposed. But it doesn't sound like they've made much movement on it since the last time we received an update. On your previous, but I can follow up with a couple of people about that. On the wastewater monitoring, so that's something that the health department is doing actively. Of course, that there is a monitoring station in Southern Orange County for wastewater. And one of the things we actually talked about with the health director yesterday was just getting a sense of where those numbers are right now and so on, as well as some of the other surveillance tools that they've been using. So I'm happy to have, I think Chief Schmidt was checking in with Quintana Stewart about that particular issue, and we can get more information about that. Okay, Barbara?
Yeah, mine was real quick. It's OWASA related. And so isn't it time for the update? Or because of COVID? And I know we still haven't filled one of our seats, I believe, for OWASA. Something happened. There's been so much going on, you know. And then Wesley, he's new, and I know he's trying to wrap his arms around all of that with the advisory boards and the commissions. But I feel like it's time for, you know, some kind of update or something.
Yeah, it has been a while. Mr. Manager, I don't know, I can't remember when we last had our regular update from OWASA. Maybe we can look at our calendar and see when that was and see if we're overdue. And Barbara, thanks for mentioning the advisory boards. I'm actually going to be setting up a meeting with Wesley soon to talk about, we do have a lot of vacancies we need to fill. So we need to talk to Wesley about what that process will be coming up. Okay. All right, y'all are making this a long agenda item. Susan and then Sam.
This is really quick. Mr. Manager, remind us, when will we be back in person?
The plans for April 11th, depending on the current metrics. Stay the same.
That week's meeting is on April 12th, Tuesday, April 12th.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sammy, I don't know if that's a new hand or an old hand, but
Yeah, sorry, it is a new hand. I just would, I brought this up a couple of times, this idea of weatherizing every low-income home by 2030. And I think I would like for us to have a conversation about that through a work session, possibly. So I'd like to officially request that we have that conversation, if that's okay with everyone.
And Sammy, I'm sorry, Mayor, go ahead. Go ahead. I had a comment about that.
I want to be mindful of the manager's role in helping figure out timing for budget items. I don't know where that would fit in terms of upcoming calendar stuff that you have for us on climate action. But this weatherization program issue keeps coming up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask Sammy or the mayor, if we manage to have a conversation about it, which is a good idea, if we would engage our advisory boards respectively around the same topic, or is it just a work session for us? For example, affordable housing advisory commission, maybe climate action team, or maybe the climate action team has already had the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that this topic is sort of in the context of our climate action plan, right? And so,
it's both. I think Barbara's right. It's one of those that, you know, one stone. The synergy is there for both addressing affordable housing and climate.
Yeah, I get that. I get that part. But what I'm saying is, I'm just trying to think about in terms of when Richard looks into whether there's enough time to slip this into an agenda, whether there's already a plan to be coming back and updating us about certain initiatives going on with the climate action plan, and maybe this is one of them. I just don't know. I think it might be just for Richard, and I can talk with Richard to follow up with Richard about this. Is like, do we already have something scheduled coming up around the climate action plan where this conversation about the weatherization program would fit? Or do we need to find another opportunity to receive an update from staff on that particular issue? And I just know I haven't looked at the long-term calendar for a while, so just need to check with the manager about it.
Sure. I mean, if you guys could talk about that, I would encourage not to have it be included as a general or another item within the general update that we get on climate action, because I think it warrants some discussion, and it may even have some budget impact and conversations with our neighboring jurisdictions in terms of potentially, pitching in to staff up with the home repair coalition. That last time they did a presentation to us, they were very clear about not having the staffing permanent. So there's an opportunity for us to really think about that in terms of where we want to go with that. So that's why I think it would be worthy of the council's having a discussion about it.
I will talk about this with Richard.
Great, thank you. And just one quick last thing, the zero waste people that the county has contracted out with at the last SWAC meeting requested input on what potential stakeholders they could do presentations to. Given that we are very big partners in terms of we do trash pickup and and we do recycle. Well, we're trying to find, I don't know if it's a county function or not, the space for recycling. I think it behooves us to get a presentation from that zero waste outfit, given that they're soliciting, who to reach out to. And I think that we have plenty to talk to them about, also because of composting, our interests in the long term. There's a reason why there's representatives of the various towns on that SWAC team, and why y'all are guiding them. I think it would make a lot of sense for the council to have a look into what what the questions are they're raising, so that we could, give y'all the input so you could represent appropriately.
Thank you. I think one of the issues we'll need to figure out is, as you mentioned, Sammy, these consultants were hired by the county. They work for the county. They don't. And so I think if it is in fact the case that they are seeking opportunities to make a presentation to other bodies or other groups, then that might be a good opening for us. But I just want to make sure that we're not, these are the county's consultants. They're not the town of Carrboro's consultants. We're not.
Absolutely. And the county works very closely with us in terms of solid waste. And at that last meeting, they were very clear, the consultants, requesting of the members of that group, please provide input on what stakeholders they should be reaching out to. So at a minimum, they could say, no, we can't do that. But if you put in the request, let them decide, whether they can or not. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to be considered.
Thanks. So Richard, you got that.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thanks for that, Sammy. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn 3 minutes before 9 o'clock.
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved by Sammy, seconded by Danny, that we adjourn. All in favor, please raise your hand so I can see. Matter passes unanimously. Have a great night, everybody.
Deuces.
Take care.